The rain came down hard on the streets of New Chicago. It was the kind of rain that soaked through clothes and made bones ache. The year was 2189, and the city had grown tall and dirty over the decades. Towers of glass and steel reached toward the gray sky. But down below, in the streets where ordinary people lived, everything was old and broken. Daniel Harper walked home from work with his head down and his jacket pulled tight. He was 32 years old, with tired eyes and rough hands. He worked at the orbital freight yard, loading cargo onto ships that flew between Earth and the colonies. It was hard work that paid little, but it was honest work, and Daniel was grateful to have it. The Undercity was not a safe place after dark. People kept to themselves here. They walked fast and looked straight ahead. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody stopped to help strangers. That was just how things were. Daniel had learned these rules as a child. His grandmother had raised him in these same streets, back when things were even harder, back when the dragons still ruled. He tried not to think about those times. Most people tried not to think about them. The occupation was history now, something taught in schools and shown in old footage. But for people who had lived through it, the memories never really faded. Daniel turned a corner and saw her. She sat against a concrete pillar near the entrance to an old subway station that no longer worked. A thin blanket covered her shoulders. Her hair was long and silver-white, tangled and dirty. Her face was thin and worn, like someone who had not eaten well in a very long time. A small cup sat on the ground in front of her. It was empty. Daniel walked past her. He had seen many beggars in the Undercity. There was nothing unusual about this one. He had his own problems, his own bills to pay, his own life to worry about. But something made him stop. He did not know what it was at first. A feeling in his gut. A cold sensation that started at the back of his neck and moved down his spine. He turned around slowly and looked at the woman again. She raised her head and met his eyes. Daniel felt his heart stop. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the street lamps. Not brightly, but enough to see. They were a pale gold color, and the pupils were not round like human eyes. They were vertical slits, like the eyes of a cat, or like the eyes of something much older and much more dangerous. He knew those eyes. Every human alive knew those eyes. 40 years ago, those eyes had stared down at humanity from every screen on the planet. They had belonged to the most powerful being Earth had ever known, the Empress of the Draconid Imperium, the dragon who had conquered humanity and ruled them for 3 decades. Her name was Vera Thrax. Daniel stood frozen in the rain. His mind could not process what he was seeing. This was impossible. Verathrax was dead. She had died during the uprising, when human forces destroyed her flagship over Mars. Everyone knew this. It was in every history book. But here she was, sitting in the rain, begging for coins. The woman watched him with those ancient eyes. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply waited to see what he would do. Daniel's hands began to shake. He thought about running. He thought about calling the authorities. He thought about the reward money that still existed for information, about surviving Draconid leaders. But he did none of these things. Instead, he looked at her thin frame, her dirty clothes, her empty cup. He looked at the way she shivered in the cold. He looked at the hunger in her face. This was not the terrifying Empress from the old footage. This was a broken creature, a remnant of something that had once been mighty, but was now reduced to nothing. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a few credits. He stepped forward slowly and dropped them into her cup. The small coins made a quiet sound as they landed. The woman looked at the coins, then looked back at him. "You know what I am," she said. Her voice was rough and weak, nothing like the powerful voice from the old recordings. But the way she spoke, the careful rhythm of her words, was the same. Yes, Daniel said. His voice came out barely louder than a whisper. And yet you give me money instead of calling for my arrest. Daniel did not answer. He did not know why he had done it. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was something his grandmother had taught him long ago about kindness to strangers, even strangers who did not deserve it. Go home, human, the woman said. Forget you saw me. It will be better for both of us. Daniel turned and walked away. But he knew, even as he walked, that he would not forget. He could not forget. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his small apartment with all the lights on, staring at his old datapad. He searched through archived footage from the occupation years. He watched videos of Varathrax addressing humanity after the conquest. He studied her face, her eyes, her voice. It was her. There was no doubt in his mind. Somehow, the Dragon Empress had survived. Somehow, she had ended up on Earth, living as a beggar in the undercity of New Chicago. Daniel thought about his grandmother. She had been part of the resistance. She had fought against the Draconids when fighting seemed hopeless. She had lost friends, lost family, lost years of her life to the struggle. She had died hating the dragons with every fiber of her being. What would she think if she knew one of them was living on her streets? What would she want him to do? Daniel did not know the answers. He only knew that he could not stop thinking about those glowing eyes and that empty cup. When morning came, gray and cold like the day before, Daniel made a decision. He did not understand it. He could not explain it. But something inside him needed to know more. He needed to understand how the mighty empress of a star-spanning empire had fallen so far. He put on his coat and walked back to the Undercity. She was still there, sitting in the same spot as if she had not moved all night. Maybe she had not. Maybe she had nowhere else to go. Daniel stood in front of her for a long moment. Then he sat down on the wet concrete across from her. I have questions, he said. The dragon looked at him with those ancient golden eyes. I imagine you do, she replied. Daniel sat on the cold ground and looked at the creature before him. In the gray morning light, she looked even more worn and tired than she had the night before. Her silver hair hung limp around her face. Her skin had a faint grayish color, and he could see now the small scales that ran along her cheekbones and down the sides of her neck. They had once been beautiful, he imagined. Now they were dull and flaking. Why have you come back? Varathrax asked. Her voice was calm, but there was curiosity in it. I already told you. I have questions, and you think I will answer them? You think I owe you explanations because you gave me a few coins. Daniel shook his head. I do not think you owe me anything, but I think you want to talk. I think you have been alone for a very long time, and you want someone to talk to. The dragon studied him for a long moment. Something changed in her expression. It was small, but Daniel noticed it. A softening around the eyes. A slight drop in her shoulders. You are perceptive for a human, she said. Very well. Ask your questions. Daniel thought carefully of where to begin. There was so much he wanted to know. So much that did not make sense. Everyone thinks you are dead, he said finally. The history books say you died when your flagship was destroyed over Mars. How are you still alive? Varathrax let out a small sound that might have been a laugh. It was dry and bitter. The flagship was destroyed, she said. That much is true. But I was not on it when it fell. I escaped in a small shuttle before the final battle. My generals believed I should survive to rebuild the empire. They sacrificed themselves so that I could flee. So you ran away, yes. There was no shame in her voice, only weariness. I ran away. I watched my fleet burn from the safety of a tiny ship. I watched everything I had built crumble into nothing. And then I hid. Daniel tried to imagine it. The most powerful being in the known galaxy, hiding like a frightened animal while her empire collapsed. It seemed impossible. Where did you go? Many places. The outer moons at first, then the asteroid colonies. I moved from place to place, never staying long. I changed my appearance as much as I could. I learned to hide my true nature. She gestured at her worn face. It is not easy for my kind to disguise ourselves, but hunger and time do most of the work. And then you came to Earth. Yes, 15 years ago. Daniel frowned. Why? Of all the places in the galaxy, why would you come here? This is the world that defeated you. The people here hate your kind more than anywhere else. Lorathrax was quiet for a moment. She looked up at the gray sky, at the towers rising above the old streets. Because I needed to understand, she said softly. I needed to understand how you did it. How we did what? How you won. She looked back at him, and there was something in her eyes that Daniel had not expected to see. Confusion. True, genuine confusion. My people have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. We have conquered countless worlds. We have ruled over dozens of species. None of them ever broke free. Not one. They fought at first, yes. They always fight. But eventually they accept their place. They learn to serve. They forget that they were ever anything else. She leaned forward slightly. But not humans. You never accepted. You never forgot. You took our technology and learned it faster than we thought possible. You improved it. You made weapons we had never imagined. In less than 2 generations, you went from primitive servants to a force that could challenge us. Her voice grew quiet. How? How did you do it? Daniel thought about his grandmother again. He thought about the stories she had told him late at night, when the memories became too heavy to carry alone. My grandmother was part of the resistance, he said. She used to tell me about those times. She said humans are too stupid to know when they are beaten. She said we keep fighting even when there is no hope, because we do not know how to do anything else. Stupidity, Varathrax repeated. That is your explanation? Not stupidity exactly. Stubbornness. We do not accept things just because someone tells us to accept them. We do not follow rules just because they have always been rules. If something does not work for us, we change it. If someone tries to control us, we find a way to break free. Other species are stubborn too. It was not enough for them. Maybe it is something else then. Daniel paused, searching for the right words. My grandmother used to say that humans are always looking forward. We do not think about what is. We think about what could be. Even when everything is terrible, even when there is no logical reason to hope, we imagine something better and we fight to make it real. Varathrax considered this. Hope, she said. You are saying that hope defeated us. Hope and stubbornness and maybe a little bit of anger. We underestimated your anger. The dragon's voice was distant now, lost in memory. We had seen angry species before. Anger fades with time. Anger without power becomes despair. But human anger did not fade. It grew, it fed on itself. And it gave you the strength to do impossible things. Daniel nodded slowly. He had never thought about it this way before. The uprising had always seemed like ancient history to him, something that happened before he was born. But sitting here with the creature who had been at the center of it all, he began to understand just how remarkable it had been. Humans had been nothing. Weak, divided, primitive by galactic standards. And they had defeated an empire that had stood for thousands of years. Do you regret it? He asked. Conquering us in the first place? Varathrax was silent for a long time. I regret many things, she finally said. But not for the reasons you might think. I do not regret the conquest because it was wrong. I regret it because it was foolish. We saw a young species and assumed we understood them. We applied the same methods that had always worked before. We did not see that you were different." She looked at Daniel with those golden eyes. "And now I sit in the rain, begging for coins from the descendants of my former slaves. Perhaps that is what I deserve." Daniel did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just sat with her in the cold morning light, thinking about empires and rebellion and the strange paths that history sometimes takes. After a while, he stood up. "I have to go to work," he said, "but I will come back tomorrow." "Why?" Varathrax asked. Daniel shrugged. "Because I'm stubborn, and because I think there is more to your story." He walked away into the waking city, leaving the dragon alone with her memories. Daniel kept his promise. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Each morning before work, he would walk to the old subway entrance and sit with Varathrax on the cold concrete. Each evening after his shift ended, he would return with food from the cheap vendors near the freight yard. At first, the dragon refused to eat in front of him. She had her pride, even now. But hunger eventually won over dignity, and soon she was accepting the warm noodles and bread that Daniel brought without complaint. They talked for hours. Sometimes Daniel asked questions and Varathrax answered. Sometimes she asked questions of her own, wanting to understand how humans lived, what they believed, why they made the choices they made. It was strange, Daniel thought. He was having conversations with the most hated figure in human history, the being who had ordered millions of people into labor camps, the empress who had crushed human resistance with fire and blood for 3 decades. And yet, sitting with her in the quiet of the Undercity, she seemed almost ordinary, almost human. "Tell me about your life," Varathrax said one evening. The sun had gone down, and the street lamps cast weak yellow light over the empty street. "Tell me about your work, your home, your people." Daniel laughed. "My life is not very interesting. I load boxes onto ships. I go home to a small apartment. I sleep. I wake up and do it again. That is how most lives are lived," the dragon said. "Small and quiet and ordinary. My people never understood this. We always thought in terms of power and conquest. We measured worth by the size of empires and the number of slaves. We forgot that most beings, everywhere in the galaxy, simply want to live their small and quiet lives in peace." "Did you want peace?" Varathrax thought about this. "I wanted glory. I wanted my name to echo through history. I wanted to be remembered as the greatest empress my people had ever known." She shook her head slowly. "I achieved all of these things, and look where they have brought me." Daniel studied her face in the dim light. The scales on her cheeks caught the lamplight and gave off a faint shimmer. It reminded him that despite her weakness, despite her hunger, she was not human. She was something else entirely. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "You have been asking me personal things for days. This is different." Daniel hesitated. "How old are you, really?" Varathrax's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. "I was born 4,312 years ago by your counting of time. I have watched stars die and new ones be born. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have walked on worlds that no longer exist." Daniel tried to imagine living for so long. His mind could not grasp it. His entire existence, everything he had ever known or experienced, was less than a single heartbeat compared to her lifespan. "It must be lonely," he said. "Yes," her voice was soft. "It is very lonely, especially now. I have outlived everyone I ever knew. My family, my friends, my allies, my enemies. They are all gone. I am the last of my line. Are there other draconids still alive?" "Some, scattered across the galaxy, hiding as I am hiding. But we do not speak to each other. We cannot risk discovery. We live alone and we will die alone." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. It was sympathy, he realized. He was feeling sympathy for the dragon who had enslaved his species. He did not know what to do with this feeling, so he pushed it aside. "I want to help you," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Varathrax looked at him with surprise. "Help me? Why would you want to help me?" "I do not know." Daniel ran his hands through his hair. "Maybe because you are hungry and cold and alone. Maybe because I think everyone deserves a chance, even people who have done terrible things. Maybe because my grandmother always said that mercy is what separates us from animals." "Your grandmother sounds like she was very wise." "She was." Daniel smiled sadly. "She also would probably kill me if she knew I was sitting here talking to you. She would be right to do so. I am your enemy. I am the symbol of everything your people fought against." "You were my enemy," Daniel corrected. 40 years ago. But the war is over. Your empire is gone. You are just a tired old woman sitting in the rain now. What threat do you pose?" Varathrax was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with something Daniel could not identify. "No human has ever shown me kindness," she said. "Not once in 40 years. They have shown me fear and hatred and violence. They have spat on me and thrown stones at me. They have chased me from shelter after shelter. But none of them have ever simply been kind." "Then they are fools," Daniel said. "Kindness costs nothing, and hate is exhausting. You are a strange human, Daniel Harper, so I have been told." Daniel stood up and brushed the dirt from his pants. "I have a storage unit near my apartment. It is small and cold and not very nice. But it has a roof and walls and a door that locks. You could stay there if you wanted. It would be better than sleeping on the street." Varathrax stared at him. Her golden eyes were wide with disbelief. "You would give me shelter? After everything I have done?" "I would give you shelter because of everything you are doing now, which is nothing. You are hurting no one. You are just trying to survive." Daniel held out his hand. "Come on. It is going to rain again tonight." For a long moment, the dragon did not move. Daniel could see the conflict in her face. Pride warring with desperation. Fear warring with hope. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was rough and cool, covered in tiny scales that Daniel could barely feel. But her grip was firm, and when she stood with a dignity that no amount of suffering had managed to erase. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Thank me after you see the storage unit. It really is not very nice." They walked through the dark streets together, the human and the dragon, moving through the shadows of a city that had grown over the bones of empire. Above them, the first drops of rain began to fall. Daniel did not know what he was doing. He did not know where this path would lead. But something in his heart told him that this was right. That sometimes the most important thing a person could do was show kindness to a stranger, even a stranger who did not deserve it. Maybe especially a stranger who did not deserve it. The storage unit was exactly as Daniel had described it. Small, cold, and not very nice. But it had walls and a roof and a door that could be locked from the inside. For Varathrax, who had spent the last decade sleeping in alleys and under bridges, it was paradise. Daniel brought blankets and a small heating unit that he bought from a second-hand shop near the freight yard. He brought food every day, and sometimes he brought books from the library. Varathrax read them all, hungry for knowledge about the world that had defeated her. Weeks passed. The rain turned to snow, and the snow turned back to rain. The seasons shifted slowly, and Daniel and Varathrax continued their strange friendship. One evening, Daniel arrived at the storage unit to find Varathrax sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by old newspapers and printed articles. She had been reading about human history, about the wars and revolutions and social movements that had shaped the species over thousands of years. "You are a violent people," she said, as Daniel sat down across from her. "Yes," Daniel agreed. "We are. You fight among yourselves constantly. You kill each other over land, over resources, over ideas. You have destroyed entire civilizations over disagreements about religion." She picked up a paper and looked at it with fascination. "And yet you also create such beautiful things. Art, music, literature. You write stories about hope and love and sacrifice. You build monuments to peace, even as you prepare for war. We contain contradictions," Daniel said. "That is part of what makes us human. It is maddening. How can you be both so cruel and so kind? How can you wage war on Monday and write poetry on Tuesday? It makes no logical sense." Daniel thought about this for a moment. Maybe that is the point. Maybe logic is not enough. Maybe being human means accepting that we are complicated and messy and full of things that do not fit together neatly. Varathrak set down the paper and looked at him. "My people valued order above all else. We built our empire on logic and structure and clear hierarchies. Everyone knew their place. Everyone followed the rules. It was efficient and stable, and it worked for thousands of years. Until it did not. Until it did not." She nodded slowly. "We could not understand why humans refused to fit into our system. We gave you clear rules and clear punishments. We showed you the benefits of obedience and the costs of rebellion. But you kept fighting anyway. You kept breaking the rules. You kept refusing to accept your place." "Because we do not believe in places," Daniel said. "We do not believe that anyone has the right to tell us who we are or we can become. Every human being thinks they are special. Every human being believes that they matter. It is arrogant and foolish and probably wrong, but it is also the thing that makes us fight when fighting is hopeless." Varathrax was quiet for a long time. The heating unit hummed softly in the corner, filling the small space with warmth. "I've had a great deal of time to think," she finally said. 40 years of wandering and hiding and watching. And I have come to a conclusion that would have been impossible for me to reach when I was Empress." "What conclusion?" "That we were wrong. Not just strategically wrong, not just tactically wrong. We were fundamentally wrong about the nature of the universe and our place in it." She met Daniel's eyes, and there was something new in her gaze. Something that looked almost like humility. "We believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. We believed that the powerful had the right to rule over the weak. We believed that this was the natural order of things. And now? Now I understand that there are different kinds of strength. The strength to conquer is one kind. But the strength to grow, to change, to become something new, that is another kind entirely. And it is the kind that matters most." Daniel leaned back against the wall of the storage unit. Outside, he could hear the distant sound of traffic and the hum of the city going about its business. Inside, two beings from opposite ends of history were having a conversation that should have been impossible. "My grandmother used to tell me something," Daniel said. "She said that the measure of a person is not what they do when they are winning. It is what they do when they are losing. It is easy to be generous when you have everything. The real test is whether you can be generous when you have nothing. And what does that have to do with your species? Everything. Humanity spent most of its history losing. We were weak and small and surrounded by dangers we could not understand. The universe did not care about us. Nature did not care about us. But we kept going anyway. We helped each other. We shared what little we had. We built communities and cultures and civilizations out of nothing but stubbornness and hope." Daniel smiled slightly. "When the Draconids came, we were losing again. But we had been losing for so long that we knew how to handle it. We knew how to survive. We knew how to help each other even when helping seemed pointless. And eventually, we found a way to win." Varathrax closed her eyes. For a moment, She looked every one of her 4,000 years old. "I spent my life building an empire based on fear," she said softly. "I thought fear was the strongest force in the universe. I thought that if I could make everyone afraid of me, I would be safe forever. But fear is weak. Fear makes people obey, but it also makes them watch for weakness. It makes them wait for the chance to strike back. And what is stronger than fear?" The dragon opened her eyes. "Connection, trust, the belief that others will stand beside you when things become difficult. These are the things that humans have, and they are the things that my people never understood." She reached out and put her hand on Daniel's arm. Her touch was light and careful. "You could have turned me in for the reward," she said. "You could have become rich. You could have become famous. The human who captured the last dragon empress. Instead, you chose to help me. Why?" Daniel thought about the question. He had been thinking about it for weeks, trying to understand his own actions. "Because that is who I want to be," he finally said. "I want to be the kind of person who helps others, even when it is hard, even when it does not make sense, even when the person I am helping does not deserve it. I think that is what my grandmother would have wanted. I think that is what being human is supposed to mean." Varathrax squeezed his arm gently. "Then perhaps there is hope for both our species after all." The call came on a cold morning in March, 6 months after Daniel had first recognized the beggar on the street corner. He was getting ready for work when his datapad started blaring with emergency alerts. Every channel, every station, every newsfeed was showing the same thing. Ships, hundreds of them, appearing at the edge of the solar system in a flash of light and energy. Draconid. Ships. Daniel ran to the storage unit where Varathrax was staying. He found her already awake, staring at a small screen he had given her weeks ago. Her face was pale, her golden eyes wide. "They found us," she whispered. After all these years, they finally came. The news feeds were full of panic. Reporters talked over each other, trying to explain what was happening. Military experts gave their opinions. Politicians made speeches about staying calm and trusting the Terran Defense Force, but everyone was afraid. The memory of the first Draconid invasion was still fresh in the collective human mind. Parents had told their children stories. Grandparents had shared their scars. The trauma of those decades had been passed down through generations. Now the dragons were back. "Who are they?" Daniel asked, sitting down beside Varathrax. "I thought the Draconid Empire was destroyed." "The Empire, yes. But not all of my people died. Some survived, scattered across the galaxy. It seems they have been gathering, building, waiting for this moment." Varathrax's voice was hollow. "The transmissions they are sending, they speak of vengeance, of reclaiming what was lost, of punishing humanity for the rebellion." Daniel felt cold fear spreading through his body. "Can we stop them?" "I do not know. Human technology has advanced greatly since the uprising. But so has Draconid technology, apparently. And they are angry. Anger makes my people dangerous." For hours, they watched the news together. The Draconid fleet moved slowly toward the inner system, giving humanity time to prepare their defenses. It was a message, a military analyst said. The dragons wanted humanity to see them coming. They wanted to build fear. It was working. By evening, Daniel had made a decision. It was crazy and probably suicidal, but he knew it was the right thing to do. "I need you to come with me," he told Varathrax. "There is something we have to do." They took a shuttle to the orbital station where the Terran Defense Council was meeting an emergency session. Security was tight, and guards stopped them at every checkpoint. But Daniel had a plan. He had sent a message ahead, explaining who he was and who he was bringing. The doors to the council chamber opened, and Daniel walked in with the last empress of the Draconid Imperium at his side. The room exploded into chaos. People shouted. Guards drew weapons. Council members rose from their seats in shock and anger. For a moment, Daniel thought they would both be killed on the spot. "Wait," he called out, raising his hands. "Wait, please. She has information that can help us." Admiral Lisa Grant, the commander of the Terran Defense Force, silenced the room with a sharp gesture. She was a tall woman with gray hair and hard eyes, the kind of person who had seen too much to be easily surprised. "Explain yourself," she said coldly, "and explain why I should not have you both arrested." Daniel looked at Verathrax. The dragon stepped forward, straightening her spine with visible effort. "I am Verathrax," she said. Her voice was stronger than Daniel had ever heard it. "Former Empress of the Draconid Imperium. I know you have many reasons to hate me. I know I have done terrible things to your people. But right now, you have a larger problem, and I can help you solve it." The room was silent. Every eye was fixed on the dragon. "The fleet approaching your system operates on protocols that I designed," Verathrax continued. "I know their command codes. I know their tactical patterns. I know the weaknesses they have never bothered to fix because they never expected to face an enemy who knew about them." She paused. "I can give you everything you need to end this battle before it begins." Admiral Grant stared at her for a long moment. "Why would you help us?" "They are your people. They were my people. But they represent something that I no longer believe in. They come seeking vengeance for an empire that deserved to fall. They want to restore a system that was built on cruelty and oppression." Verathrax glanced at Daniel, then back at the Admiral. "I have spent 40 years living among humans. I have seen your kindness and your courage and your stubborn refusal to give up even when all hope seems lost. I have seen the best of your species, and I have learned that there are better ways to exist than the ways of the Draconid Imperium." She stepped closer to the Admiral's table. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I am asking for the chance to do something right, perhaps for the first time in my very long life. Let me help you protect your world. Let me help you save your people. And perhaps, in doing so, I can also save what remains of mine." The council debated for hours. Some wanted to arrest Verathrax and use her information through interrogation. Others wanted nothing to do with her at all. But Admiral Grant listened carefully to everything the dragon had to say, and in the end, she made the decision. They would accept Verathrax's help. The battle came 2 days later. The Draconid fleet entered weapons range, and the fighting began. But it was not the massacre that the dragons had expected. Human ships moved with precision and purpose, targeting the exact weaknesses that Verathrax had identified. Communication jamming disrupted Draconid coordination. Weapon strikes hit critical systems that should have been impossible to target. Within hours, the attacking fleet was in chaos. Their commander sent desperate transmissions, trying to understand how the humans knew so much about their tactics. But by then, it was too late. The remaining Draconid ships surrendered rather than face complete destruction. In the aftermath, Daniel stood with Verathrax at a viewport on the orbital station. They watched the captured ships being escorted to holding positions around Mars. The battle was over. Humanity had won again. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. Verathrax was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to face him. "Now begins the hard work," she said. "The surviving Draconids will need to learn how to live in a universe they no longer control. They will need to find new purpose, new meaning, new ways of being. It will not be easy for them. It was not easy for me. Will you help them? If they will let me. Many of them will hate me for what I have done today. They will see me as a traitor. But perhaps some of them will understand. Perhaps some of them will see that the old ways led only to destruction, and that there is another path." She extended her hand, palm up. in a gesture that Daniel now recognized as a draconic sign of respect. "You showed me kindness when I deserved none," she said. "You offered me shelter and food and friendship when any other human would have turned me in for reward. You reminded me that there is more to existence than power and fear." Daniel took her hand. "You showed me that people can change," he replied. "Even people who have done terrible things. Even people who seem beyond redemption. If a 4,000-year-old dragon empress can learn to see the world differently, then maybe anyone can." Varathrak smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile, but it was real. "Perhaps," she said, "that is the true strength of humanity. Not your weapons or your technology or your stubborn refusal to surrender, but your ability to believe in change. Your ability to offer second chances. Your ability to see the potential for good in even the darkest places." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Perhaps," he agreed. They stood together at the viewport, watching the stars as a new chapter in galactic history began to unfold. Behind them, human and draconic officials were already meeting, discussing the terms of peace, exploring the possibility of a future that no one had ever imagined. It would not be easy. There would be anger and fear and setbacks along the way. But for the first time in 40 years, there was also hope. And hope, as Daniel's grandmother had always said, was the most human thing of all.